we might have saved a lot more money, but I'll let you finish your answer.
I think that's the primary reason, because the pressure, number one, the governor asked our employees to take a wage freeze. I think our people stepped up to the plate and did that.
And the statewide organization recommended that its members should take a wage freeze.
But not everyone did. I think ours stepped up, did the right thing. And again, and I've said many times, the thing that bothered us the most was the fact that state aid, that bothered me more than anything else. When you cut out $545,000 worth of charter school reimbursements, I think that sent a message to taxpayers throughout the state that we really don't count public education. But I think most of us, in an effort to respond to tough economic conditions, did those kind of things we did. You know, it wasn't easy looking at a system with already high class sizes and then recommending that we don't fill 12 positions. And already, and as Mr. Richmond has said multiple times, you look at our class sizes compared to our neighbors, and ours are up very high.
Again, I agree, but why aren't you proposing a higher tax increase if you would like to do something about that?
Because it simply is not the time, Mr. Stoltz. Okay?
But Mr. Ballard was just saying that we shouldn't worry about looking good. We should worry about doing the right thing.
I think this budget is the right thing at this particular point in time.
I would ask my fellow board members, I'll start with you, Mr. Earnshaw.
Address the chair, please, Mr. Stoltz, and if you have a general question that you'd like members to voluntarily respond to, please make it.
I remember you being in a similar position a couple of years ago, so I understand. Mr. Ballard, I would like to direct a question to Mr. Earnshaw about, and I understand that he does have legitimate concerns about the future of the district, but if he's so concerned about cutting $300,000 to reduce the tax increase for this year, why not propose that we go back to, say, 2.5% tax increase to make sure that our district is where it ought to be by this time next year, particularly since, I mean, Mr. Ballard, you know as well as anyone that this is probably going to pass, where they're going to eliminate all exceptions. Why not increase it above that and prepare for when we can only raise it by 0.9% next year?
I'll ask Mr. Earnshaw if he wishes to respond to that or not.
I'll wait for my turn.
Again, if any of the other people, Ms. Fuller, for example, would like to respond to that, that she thinks that she seems to think that 1.8% tax increase is just a catastrophe for the school district and it should be higher, and that she's glad that her students, or her children, I did have the pleasure of having a couple of classes with them, have benefited from East Penn education, which is very good. I'm not belittling that at all. But if they're concerned about $300,000 less, well, it's only a little bit of a difference. Why not propose $300,000 more? That's, by the way, I'll support the amended budget, but I won't support the 1.8. So, okay, go on. I yield the floor.
Earnshaw? Oh, Ms. Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Earnshaw. I brought along my budget book from last year. It's the only one that I brought along which has the actuals for 2000. Well, actually, we have the actual for 2009, 2010, but it has the budgeted amount for 2009, 2010. So if we look at the budgeted amount back last year when we had the 2009, 2010, because we hadn't closed out the year yet, our beginning fund balance was $7.5 million. And it looked like we were going to have to use up about $2 million in fund balance. And we wound up with a $5.4 million ending fund balance. Now, how did we work out actually? Well, we actually had a $9.7 million beginning fund balance. So already we were $2 million higher with our actual fund balance than where we budgeted we were going to start out with. And then we said that we would need to spend $2 million of our fund balance to arrive at this $5.4 million. When in fact, we actually saved $295,000. And so we really wound up at a $10 million ending fund balance, a $5 million difference. As you stated earlier, Mr. Ballard, when you were comparing budget to actual, I'm actually comparing the same year. I'm looking at the budgeted amount for 2009, 2010 versus the actual amount. So we budgeted that where we were going to end up at the end of 2010 was at 5.4 million. When in reality, we wound up at positive 10 million. So where are those differences? Well, first of all, the estimated starting fund balance, the beginning fund balance was $2 million lower than it was. And we actually didn't have to spend $2 million. We saved $295,000. So if you add the $2 million plus another $2 million that we didn't really spend, you get up to about the $10 million fund balance. So my point being that when you look at this June summary here, and now we'll go to the next column, the budgeted 2010-2011 column. It says that we're going to spend basically $2.6 million of fund balance. Well, we should be winding up with then an ending fund balance of about $5.4 million. When in reality, we're actually going to be something much significantly higher than that. And it's difficult to look at these numbers because you're not comparing them to the actuals. So my point being is that we probably won't be spending $2.6 million of fund balance when we get the actuals for 2010, 2011. Do you have a comment on that, Ms. Sertable? Do you have any idea whether we've spent $2.6 million?
Well, that's basically the figure that I mentioned to Mr. Ballard earlier, because we're actually estimating the ending fund balance to be $8.8 million.
Right.
Which, going down from $10 million, so we're really spending $1.2 million of fund balance.
So we didn't spend the
If we achieve the
Right.
estimate.
Right, so we didn't really spend the 2.7 we thought we would back then when we made that budget.
Correct, but both this year and last year, Dr. Seidenberger put a freeze into place very early into the year and stopped spending so we could achieve better.
I want to remind everybody also, last year, when we approved our budget, the state budget came after ours, and there was a significant increase. We put a significant increase last year's budget for PSERS payments that did not come to
Yes, that's
fruition.
true, because the legislature, after we approved our budget,
It was in the
told us we
neighborhood,
didn't have to
less
spend
on,
what we expected.
Okay.
Ms. Sertable, unless I'm mistaken, it was in the neighborhood of $700,000, some of it.
Yes,
It was
it
significant.
was very
It
significant.
was significant.
All right, but even so, our starting fund balance for the year 2009, 2010 was off by $2 million from the year before. So it's something that kind of passes on through year after year. I guess my point is, you know, $300,000 is really a drop in the bucket compared to the major swings of a lot of these accounts. And if we can say it's a cosmetic change to reduce the taxes back down to the 1.4% index, we can say it's also a cosmetic change to not do that. You know, it's really not going to save the district $300,000. I don't see that it's going to really do a whole lot for us going forward. And I actually take issue with some of the comments that were made that basically because my children are no longer in the district, I might be looking at this somewhat differently. I mean, I feel a little bit like Chris Christie. You know, it's really nobody's business where he sent his kids. And, you know, I've been in this job for 15 years, and to say anything about the fact that I would do it, take my responsibilities any less seriously because my children are no longer here is just not true. And as far as when we adopted the tentative budget, I don't believe anybody said that was a phony number in the budgetary reserve when we adopted the $5.4 million number. So suddenly, it increases to 5.7, and that's really what I take issue with. I voted for the budget, the tentative budget, when it was 5.4 million, and now it's changed, it's 5.7, and I don't support that. Similarly, several years ago, when we met in Shoemaker for a budget, I remember approving a tentative budget there where we had a certain spending level. And when we came back, and it wasn't even with the superintendent, then when we came back to approve the final budget, the spending level had gone up because we looked at our fund balance and it looked like we had gotten some positive movement. And I didn't vote for that budget either, because to me, I think you should leave the values where they were when we adopted the tentative budget. So again, I think it represents a tax hike to the taxpayers to fund the budgetary reserve, and I don't want to do that.
Mr. Earnshaw.
So to clarify one of my points, my comment about having children in the schools giving me more visibility was not a comment of lack of interest, lack of job performance, or lack of concern for the schools. When my children were not in, when I had no children at the high school, I had very little visibility in what was happening at the high school. Now that I have no regular ed kids in the elementary level, I don't see what's happening there as much. I see acutely what's happening in the middle schools, and I see acutely what's happening in the high schools because I see it in the things that my children bring home. I see it in the things we're asked to do with our children. And I simply did not have that visibility before, and I suspect that most of us don't have that visibility if we don't have kids in the school. I don't know that for a fact. I'm talking from my own experience. So a couple of points. Mr. Policano said he thought we'd come up with another potentially $2 million in the beginning fund balance. Ms. Serval, the fund balance that we've got here on the current budget proposal is $8.84 million. What is the likelihood that in the next 3 days, when our fiscal year ends, we will receive another roughly $2 million in revenues we weren't expecting, or that our expenditures will come in $2 million less than we're expecting over the next 3 days by the end of our fiscal year? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. I'm just thinking, when I do probabilities, I'm thinking that looks like close to 0% chance that suddenly $2 million is going to materialize in the next 3 days.
Yes, but actually things that happen in July and August often get taken back to this current budget. So we could have expenses coming that we still pay in July and August that get taken back to this budget year appropriations because the services or the goods were received in June.
Sure, accrual-based accounting. Absolutely.
Right, and that especially will happen this year because of the accounts payable person retiring in my office. So we've had to try to scramble to cover accounts payable, and I expect the expenses were lower than normal because of that this year. So there's still a lot of unknown.
But I mean, how confident are you in this $8.8 million?
I'm confident in the 8.
We know it will be different
Yes.
once we get the audit report.
Yes, I'm confident in the 8.8 million, or I wouldn't have recommended it.
All right, that's what I assumed, so thank you. So I don't think just magically we're going to have a bunch of additional money up there. We might have some, we might even have more than we expect. This close to the end of the fiscal year, I think that's unlikely. One of the things that Mr. Ballard said is that we estimate our revenues and we estimate our expenditures. Yes, we do both, but when we adopt a budget, not only is that an estimate, it is also a cap. We cannot spend above it. We hope to spend less. But even when we estimate, if it looks like, oh my gosh, we need more money in utilities than we thought we were going to, PPL's electric rates were higher than they went, our usage was higher, we don't say, oh well, we'll just spend more. We have to transfer money from some other part of the budget into the utilities account to pay it. I'm correct, right, Mr. Glancy? So when we adopt that expenditures budget, that is a firm ceiling that we cannot exceed without reopening